Hi, everyone. Welcome into Life and Law with Debora Diaz. We're back.
Hello.
Our
Yes.
second show.
Second show. This is exciting.
This is
Hello.
This is so exciting. If you missed our first show, and maybe you're new to this one, I guess that would be one of the same, right?
Right.
Anyway, I'm
This
Barbara.
is our second show.
Exactly. I'm Barbara Marville. I just want to let you know that
And I'm Debora Diaz.
That's right. Debora Diaz, family law, and above and beyond that. We're going to be talking about some very interesting topics today. But before we get into that, I just wanted to mention that Debora has 22 years of family law experience. And of course, her sort of tagline is she cares, she's compassionate, courageous, and always available. You always get a chance to talk with Debora. To me, if I am going to hire an attorney, I want to be able to talk to you. So rather than go through the middle person and that kind of thing, I really commend you for that. So we had a great show, our first one right out of the gate.
And got a lot of good feedback.
A lot of good feedback, yes. So today we decided that we would just jump right in there to some topics. One is sexual harassment. We've seen a little bit of that out in the workplace, out there on the news and things like that, right?
That's been in the news. If you haven't heard, most famous contract or settlement just last week, Bill O'Reilly. Sean Hannity's in the news, Bill Cosby's been in the news, and there's others. But those are the recents that have been headlines. So.
Right. And now we're going to be talking about that. We're also going to be talking about sexual discrimination, and we're also going to be talking about bullying. We touched on that subject matter last week because of a current events news. Something had happened in our community with a 16-year-old that touched you very deeply. So we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about recognizing all of these different topics because we never know when something like that is going to actually face us in our life's path.
It's part of life.
It is part of life, but there's things that we can do and understand by having somebody as an expert in law to maybe sort of give you an inkling on what to look for, different little high signs in case we didn't. Okay, so sexual discrimination, that's coming up next, but sexual harassment. How do we know, are we being sexually harassed? No, seriously, I mean, how do we know? Is it like right before our eyes? Is it that obvious? Or
it can be. It can be. Sexual harassment, the key to understanding is that it's unwanted sexual advances in the workplace or in an educational, in some other places where the perpetrator has control, control over the job or maybe control over the education opportunity. So it can be as simple as, it sounds simple, as jokes of a sexual nature in the workplace, comments about body parts, comments about sexual activity, posting lewd jokes and spreading them around maybe the office email. And this is stuff that happens in many workplaces. If someone is offended by it, and if it's unwanted, if a boss or a coworker is constantly saying to the other person, "I really like how you look today," and keeps doing it, and the person that does not want that says, "What you're saying to me is uncomfortable. Please don't say it to me again." That can be sexual harassment.
Really?
If you're making, you really look nice. You look hot today in that dress.
I can see that. That would.
But sometimes even if that it's just a constant pattern of, you look nice today. You look nice. Oh, that dress really, you really do justice to that dress today, or things. Or wear those sweaters. I really like it when you wear those sweaters. I mean, things. Cut this pattern of comments, and the person, if they say, "Please don't talk to me like that. I don't want that." And if that doesn't work, there should be a chain hierarchy of reporting that you can, that the person can file a complaint with their employer. But the key is that it's unwanted, because I don't want to say, there's many times that people, we're spending great amount of time. Where do we spend most of our time? If we're not at home, a lot of us are at work.
Or at the job, yes.
So where do you meet people that you fall in love with and end up in relationships with? At the workplace. So it's when it's of an unwanted aggressiveness, unwanted behavior is sexual harassment as defined under Title VII.
So if something like that is happening and maybe somebody is a little bit naive, or is it how they're feeling? It's how they're feeling, like if they're squirming and if they're like, ooh, that didn't sound right. That didn't make me feel right. Is that the first inkling that?
Could be the first inkling.
And that's male or female?
It's male or
female?
Be male. It can be male, female,
Yeah,
female, female.
yeah.
It doesn't. It's it's behavior that's of a sexual nature that's unwanted.
Okay.
Is sexual harassment.
Okay.
Most progressive, employers will have some kind of sexual harassment policy posted and have it in place with the hierarchy of what should happen. Either go, because if it's a coworker.
Yes.
Now, if it's your supervisor, it shouldn't be you report the sexual harassment to your supervisor. Good policies
Obviously,
will
yeah.
have that you go to the HR, human resources person, or maybe another supervisor. So there should be a good chain in a good sexual harassment policy of what the procedure is to report it, and you should report it if it's going on.
Sure, absolutely. And I would guess that type of situation can happen to more than one person in the workplace by that same person that is offending. And
Correct.
It goes
That
right
could
around
be.
the office.
It could
Now, sometimes it might be a little bit easier to recognize. You know what? My first experience on my first job. Now, this was the innocence, the naivety of a 16-year-old. Right? I was working at a bank. The president of the bank, my superior, wanted to show me something in the furnace room. No, I'm serious.
Yeah.
And I was really innocent, and I went, and he just chased me around the furnace, and I ran out, but I didn't know what was going on there. I was 16.
Well, and that could rise to even more. I mean, if you're talking about that there's this aggressive behavior, it could even be, I've just touched a little bit on Title VII, and there's a Florida Civil Rights Act, which prohibits sexual harassment, but it could be an assault or it could be a battery if there's a touching. So,
right.
an unwanted, a battery is an unwanted touching. So there's some other tort claims that someone might have as recourse, but the premier, whatever this, Title VII is the enforcement mechanism.
Wow.
For sexual harassment.
So it's something as to how you feel, when you're in the workplace or wherever you are. What about being out on the street and you run into somebody that you have worked with or you're involved with, and they make a compliment on how nice you look or something like that?
Well, that's going to depend. Again, we're not legislating against all bad behavior, and there's a lot of bad behavior out there. All right, we're talking either in the workplace or in there's in the education, maybe in the education, students, professors, or that whole realm in the educational institutions. But if it's just on the street and somebody, that's not going to be protected. You don't have recourse under Title VII. Title VII is a law that applies to employers if they have 15 or more employees.
Oh, 15 or more.
15 or more employees.
So what if there's less than 15? You mean that
there's no coverage? Unfortunately, there's no coverage.
That doesn't make any sense.
We have a whole gamut of employers, small employers with 3, 4, 5, 6, less than 15 that are not covered.
So basically, if they know the law, that they can do that and get away with it then? Is that what we're talking about here?
Basically, unfortunately, yes. I had this conversation a few weeks ago. Somebody was asking me about the potential for a case, and this was an employer, about the potential for a case.
Sure.
And I asked the person, and how many employees do you have? And the response was like 10. And I said, well, then there really won't be a recourse under Title VII because you don't meet the employee threshold. And the person's response was to me, well, that's stupid. Because he was progressive. The employer was progressive, meaning people can get away with this, and yes, the reality is. So, what's the solution? I don't know if we'll ever get it, but would be to change the law. How do we get changes? To legislate it.
Wow. What do you think of that? It is stupid. Give us a call.
That was one of the that was one of the, the key is I was going to destroy small employers. It's always the small businesses shouldn't comply, but we have a whole sector of employers that Title VII doesn't apply to.
I never knew that. I never knew that. I thought if you were regardless of how many people were in a workplace, if somebody is doing something that is wrong, then they're doing something that is wrong.
Now, there might be some other, enforcement, some other ways of recourse, as I said, maybe some kind of tort claim, but it's not going to be under Title VII.
Wow. You're just such a wealth of information here. I'm glad we're talking about this today. And we did want to come sort of right out of the gate and talk about some things that are prevalent out there in the communities, everywhere. It's not just one type of environment, not one type of business or anything like that. It's out there. We only have a couple of minutes before our first break, and then we're going to be talking about sexual discrimination in the next segment. I mean, we have so many topics to carry through with Debora and her knowledge as a very accomplished attorney in the community. If you have questions, feel free to give us a call, because John, our producer, and extraordinary producer at that, will let us know, and we'll pass some answers on to you as to what you can share in kind of generalities.
And I just want to throw out there, if you are someone that's in a situation that you're being sexually harassed, is to keep a calendar, keep a log, take notes, understand it's better. You need that evidence, and that memories fade. It's not good enough to say this happened 6 weeks ago, whatever. You keep a calendar, a log of specific dates with some specific people that are around to just build the case and understand.
That's a good way to wrap this segment up. So document.
And employers can be protected by having a sexual harassment policy in place. Because if you have a place, and because one of the defenses is we have a sexual harassment policy in place, and employee X did not use it. He or she did not complain. So it's a defense that the employer can use. So
wow, that's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
That really is. Stick around. We'll be right back with more with Debora Diaz.
revolutionary in his field, Dr. Bonatti created, perfected, and patented the Bonatti spine procedures. Using his genius, Bonatti invented precise tools necessary to minimize surgery, scarring, anesthesia, and recovery. So successful are the Bonatti spine procedures, they consistently reflect 98.75% patient satisfaction. 50,000 successful procedures have been performed exclusively at our location. Over half our patients have suffered from failed back and neck surgeries at other facilities. Bonatti succeeds where others fail.
You're covered.
Covered.
We talked during the break, so welcome back in, everyone, to Life and Law with Debora Diaz. Boy, that was a very enlightening short segment.
A short snippet. There's so much more.
Yeah, it's just
a snippet to get people talking and thinking.
Yes, just to scratch the surface, right? There's going to be more as you tune in on Thursdays at 4:30. I'm Barbara Marvel. It really is an honor to be working with you. I look so forward to this show because we're able to bring information that so much that I never even knew, and I'm sure many of you never knew. In this segment, what we're going to be talking about is we went from sexual harassment now to sexual discrimination. Okay, so you gave us some tips on how to recognize. I mean, it seems like we should know when we're being sexually harassed, but what about sexual discrimination? How do we know that? How do we even think about that? I mean, as humans, we're very trusting people, so yeah.
Well, it's discrimination in employment or an education opportunity.
Okay.
Can be sexual discrimination. It's typically a woman because that's where against a woman, and it's the basis is because she's a woman that she gets the crappy job, or that she gets a lot less salary or benefits, and that. So it's discrimination based on a person's gender. Okay, either as I said, either in the employment or in the education. There's been a lot in the news about that. So it's treated differently because of your gender. Okay, one of the cases in the news to bring it to the forefront is the women's soccer team. Okay, they play in the World Cup. Okay, I think the last figures were that the women have to win 20 exhibition matches to get $99,000. Okay, the men make over $263,000 for playing the same amount of games.
The same amount of games.
The same amount of games.
The same amount of time.
The same amount.
The same type of game.
This is our, yes, okay. So, and if they don't win any of those, they still get $100,000.
While the gals are struggling.
Brought a case, right. So this is our, I mean, but that's one that's, notorious. It's in the news because they're on television and they're winning games, and they, everyone knows the name Hope Solo, and so that's in the, yes, and it's the same thing in other sports, NBA, women's, and so the differences. I mean, men make more than women in the tennis, and some of the justification used is that the advertisers are paying, they don't get as many sponsors, but that doesn't cover everything, because the women's soccer team brings in a lot of money, and they get a lot of audience on the television for watching this, the World Cup for women. So they have a case that's pending, and this is in the schools. Women coaches have throughout, the basketball coaches, the hockey, and as far as get paid less than the male coaches. So it's an issue out there that needs to be addressed, and we have an Equal Pay Act, but that doesn't to try to address it, but it's pervasive throughout our society that women make less than men do.
So if you're working for a corporation and you're quite happy with your salary, right? And you're a higher up exec in the company, what constitutes a female employee to dig and see what her colleagues are making? How does
gets
that
difficult because a lot of that information is confidential.
Exactly.
And you can be disloyal. Some employers have that it's a violation of their policies if you're sharing your
yes.
salary information.
Yes.
So that becomes difficult. So a lot of times some of this information doesn't come out. There's a slip up or something in the workplace, or someone brings a
Right.
suit, and then the salary information would become part of the lawsuit, because then you can subpoena records and get records as part of discovery. So then it will come out, and then that might bring in more people to file because of, making less than the same. And again, it's not a clear cut. It doesn't mean exact same. It's equal pay for the exact same job. I mean,
Right.
with, you got to have, the same experience, education, work history. So it just doesn't mean, it's a more thorough analysis.
I see what you're
But
saying.
you still want, you want to look at it and say, is this person, should that person be making the same as the other, should the female be making as much as the male?
And that's a very
they're doing.
uncomfortable feeling when you know that you're doing the same work and you're really busting your stays to do a really good job. What happens in the situation where females are looking for to get a raise, to get a promotion? Well, how does that? What have you seen in the workplace with that as to how they can advance themselves and yet they aren't, but their colleagues who supposedly has that same
It could be
criteria?
that could be a discrimination. It could be this. I just want to comment, for years, and this probably that would for the viewers, that for years teachers and nurses especially was a female-dominated profession, and more males started being nurses. I mean, had an incident where I had not me personally, but an acquaintance had to be in the hospital, and there were more male nurses than female nurses on the shifts, so more males. So as the males invaded or worked in the profession, the salaries have increased. It's an interesting, and I have read it, that because men are in the profession, okay, this is just my personal, that the salaries have increased because men are in the profession.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. I wonder if that's ever going to change, all this, I mean...
Again, until, what's happening, it's not going to change if everybody just sits around. Okay?
Thank you.
It's going to change if people know about it, are active, they talk to their legislators, they talk to employers, that they, make us think about it.
That's basically
Really,
what it is.
It is.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah.
to say, I want to be paid equally for what I'm doing.
Exactly. I mean,
And it's learning to value yourself, okay? If the two people are doing the same job, with the same experience, same history, okay, they should be getting the same pay.
absolutely, and that does become an issue out in the workplace. I've had several jobs with big corporations. Personally, I never found myself going down that road, but there were others in the corporations that did, and clearly some things had happened, and I was the recipient of quite a very sizable increase
Oh, good for you.
in my salary.
Good for you.
So I thought, I know I'm doing a good job, but am I really doing that good of a job? And then I heard what was going on, but I was just very, I guess, naively very appreciative for what I was receiving and what I was doing and the benefits and things like that. Not to mention any names or anything, but it's just sometimes you just don't think of these things. It's like being chased in the furnace room.
Right.
I had
right.
no clue what that was all about till years later.
Well, if it doesn't feel right, I mean, there's something.
Yeah,
something
now,
wrong, right?
now.
Someone's asking you to go in.
No. Oh my goodness. John's in our ear.
I know. When at that age, it is an issue. That I mean, there's people out there. They take advantage of people. I mean, the other case in
yeah.
the news, the teacher that kidnapped the young girl. She was right. I mean, she's having issues at home, and so up here, a male figure that's supposed to be a position of authority took advantage of that.
And I would think that could actually kind of segue. We've got 90 seconds, and that could almost constitute as bullying in a way.
Taking
Advantage?
it's causing harm in a sense, and maybe a little bit kind of tweaking to the one end of bullying.
Yeah.
But it's causing harm. Definitely causing harm
Right.
to that,
Right.
and that's what bullying does, is causes harm. So.
Yeah, but I can understand how, maybe a teenager, somebody maybe that doesn't have that high self-esteem, and there's a lot of them out there today that don't, and that if they have an employer or somebody that is really off limits.
Someone's paying attention to them. That's
exactly.
what these predators do.
Yes.
Someone pays attention to them.
Yes, yes.
It grooms them to take advantage of them.
And then they end up in that situation, and they're
So
kind of
that's
stuck.
So that's why parents need to be watching and listening and monitoring social media.
That's
Going
true.
into and knowing what's going on in their children's life.
Thank you for saying that about social media, because I'll tell you, that's where a lot of awful things happen from in many, many ways. I mean, it just does. Well, we have just a few seconds remaining. Hopefully you are enjoying the show and the enlightenment that Debora is bringing us on family law. Coming up in the next segment, we're going to touch on that horrible subject of bullying. And in our last hour, we have Mr. Rob Imperato, who is an empowering life coach who deals with bullying, and he has a chapter of that in his book. He's going to be coming on and sharing some things. We'll be talking about that. So stay right where you are, get your favorite beverage, and we'll be right back. More with Life and Law with Debora Diaz.
Revolutionary in his field, Dr. Bonatti created, perfected, and patented the Bonatti spine procedures. Using his genius, Bonatti invented precise tools necessary to minimize surgery, scarring, anesthesia, and recovery. So successful are the Bonatti spine procedures, they consistently reflect 98.75% patient satisfaction. 50,000 successful procedures have been performed exclusively at our location. Over half our patients have suffered from failed back and neck surgeries at other facilities. Bonatti succeeds where others fail.
Hi everyone, welcome into Life and Law with Debora Diaz. I'm Barbara Marville Kelly and I have the Honorable Debora Diaz.
Not honorable.
22 years, absolutely you are, and very well known with an excellent reputation in the community in family law for 22 years. I mean, that's a long time. We've been talking about sexual discrimination, sexual harassment, two subjects that are just about in the news on a regular basis. Something that
Probably every week.
It really is. The other subject matter is bullying, and I can barely even talk about that without having tears in my eyes because it's just very unnecessary. I had quite a conversation with Rob Imparato the other day, the life empowerment coach, and he works with these kids that are being bullied, and he shared some really heartwarming stories with me. I'm glad he's going to be joining us in the last segment. But what has been your experience? Last week, it hit you hard. A child locally took her own life as a result of bullying.
And it's because it's been like probably the third incident within just a short period of time where we're reading in the news a child, a teenager is taking their life, and how sad that is that they think that there's no other choice but to take their life because there's bullying around, and there's different forms of bullying. Either it's in the school or somebody's done something posted something on a website or blogging about someone, and this just it can go viral among their group of contacts or friends, and that's a form of cyber bullying. So most schools have a bullying policy. The state of Florida has a bullying statute, and most states either have some kind of there's no federal statute, but most states either have some type of policy or anti-bullying statute. So there's a good website that I wanted to refer. It's actually the Florida Department of Education that parents can go on and see a really good list of resources, some good background information, read the Florida statute, and read about some tips on what to do if your child is experiencing it, because it is a serious problem. And I think it even gets more pervasive because of this wave of social media. And one of my pet peeves or thinking of saying is that social media is not necessarily social.
Exactly.
Meaning people are not nice to each other. We see it in other ways. It doesn't necessarily rise to bullying, but when people express their opinions and comments on Facebook or other sources, where people respond in such a hateful, negative way to the comment because they're hidden behind a computer screen and they just type away and push send, and there's like no other thought.
No filter.
No filter and no thought to the harm. And, I'm not sure, maybe they would say that in person, maybe not. So the parents have to be aware of the social media, really know what your children are doing, what they're doing in school, what social media sites they're on. I mean, there's nothing wrong with monitoring, and there's programs for this, computer programs, with monitoring what the children are on.
Right, because that could really be a great preventative way of having your child be receiving posts about them and things like that that would drive them, that could drive them to taking their life. In your experience, do you think that, I mean, I would guess parents would probably have some sort of an inkling if they're a proactive parent, because when a child is being bullied, I'm guessing that they're withdrawing, they're going into depression, maybe spending a lot of time in their room, a lot of time on their phone, reading on the web.
Yeah, we'll leave Rob, our expert, to talk about science. I can only talk from what I've read about and understand, and saying that there's got to be they may or may not tell their parents about it. They may not want to be ostracized by saying something, but to be aware how your child is acting.
Right.
Is there a difference in behavior? Is there a difference in eating habits? Are there things they're no longer doing that they used to enjoy doing?
There you go.
Kind of just so knowing it really is being involved in your child's life.
Knowing
it
your
really
child.
is
Knowing your child.
It really is knowing what's going on and stuff. Who are their friends? Be having a conversation. Who are their friends? Who did they hang out with today? What have they done? What did they do after school? And just being an active participant, and not checking out and just leaving it to that they can
leaving the social media being the babysitter,
exactly,
more or less, because I think that's
Exactly.
probably what's happening out there, limiting the time on social media and
I
everything
think it
too.
should be limited. I think it can be addicting. I'm talking about, I think social media can be addicting.
Yes, yes,
Okay?
there's no doubt. There's no doubt about that. Thank goodness I have conscious parenting with my son and his wife, with my little 3-year-old grandson. But he could pick up that iPad or that iPhone and teach me a few things on it. It's really kind of crazy the way it's going today. What about bullying among adults?
I think there can be bullying among adults. I mean, there can be a bully in the workplace, and then we'll have to look at a statute to see if there's, because then in the workplace, it may rise to sexual harassment. Okay, bullying. So they're kind of, they can be, it could be the same.
Kind of crossover?
It could be they're intertwined. They could be a crossover. The bullying could be, yes. I mean, maybe the harasser is trying to give someone attention, and the person's rejected that person, and so then it might be bullying as far as hours of work, the tone of maybe the communication, the tone of emails, maybe getting the worst job there is. So there could be some there overlap of the bullying, like work on Saturday, you don't have a choice, or work getting the the horrible hours. So that could be. I think an argument can be made that it could be crossing into bullying. I mean, it's cruel treatment.
Yes. Yes.
To someone, bullying,
Yes.
cruel treatment,
Yes. That is
and
unnecessary.
statements. It's
And
unnecessary.
not being courteous.
So that can be as intertwined with sexual harassment.
I see.
But intersexual harassment, and then you're looking. We have a federal statute. So
Exactly.
and a state statute too.
And so if
Okay.
people, it could be male or female, I'm not, I'm just thinking of,
It can be. It doesn't decide.
even
It can
even
be-
when you said the tone, if you have somebody that you're working with or working for, and they're sharing a really belligerent tone with you, and being rude and over-towering and overpowering you.
invading your space.
Yes,
What am I-
getting in your face, right?
Yes.
Okay, very good. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break because we have Rob waiting, and I can't wait to hear some of his tips. He's a great life empowerment coach. So whether this affects you or not, hopefully it does not, but you may know someone that could
Right.
be in that position. Stick around. I think it's going to be a wealth of information in addition to what Debora is sharing with you with Life and Law, and we'll be right back after these messages, okay?
Revolutionary in his field, Dr. Bonatti created, perfected, and patented the Bonatti spine procedures. Using his genius, Bonatti invented precise tools necessary to minimize surgery, scarring, anesthesia, and recovery. So successful are the Bonatti spine procedures, they consistently reflect 98.75% patient satisfaction. 50,000 successful procedures have been performed exclusively at our location. Over half our patients have suffered from failed back and neck surgeries at other facilities. Bonatti succeeds where others fail.
Hi everyone, welcome back into Life and Law with Debora Diaz. I'm Barbara Marville Kelly, and behind me we happen to have Rob Imperato, Life Empowerment Coach. Hi Rob.
Hi Barbara. Hi Debora.
Rob.
How are you?
Good.
We're doing well, and thank you so much for joining us on the show today. We've known Rob. He's actually in our local networking group called Keep It Local, LLC. It's our VIP chapter. And I also want to give a little plug on the digital age. This book that Rob has written is a gold mine of information. And on page 76 in here, you touch on bullying. So we want to turn the show over to you so that you can really give us some tips, give our audience some kind of tips, how to recognize bullying and what we can do about it. Rob, what do you think?
It's been something that we've always had in our culture. And I think about it in this way, and I know we've had conversation. It started when I think mankind started, survival of the fittest. And they use it as a gauge now. And it is a Neanderthal way of thinking. It is brutal, and the effects are devastating for many, many people. Up to 28% of middle school children experience it firsthand. And
That's
about
horrible.
8% actually between the cyberbullying now experience bullying firsthand. So when you think about the magnitude of these numbers, up to 80% of our children
Well, that's
are
over
experiencing
1 out of 4 children,
it. Devastating.
right?
Yes.
My. So I know you've had some experience with the whole bullying picture. Give us a little overview on what you have found. And I think you shared a story with me just the other day about an incident, and it was very sad.
With that young lady?
Yes.
Okay, 9-year-old young lady. And I had just done the bullying workshop, and I had all the papers and, items that I were using for the overheads, and I went to coach her. I met her one-on-one, and I had her sitting on the floor next to me. And then we just started discussing things, and I knew innately that maybe part of the problem with bullying, we didn't discuss it, she wasn't ready yet. But then she started discussing bullying on her own. And for me, I thought she somehow got a hold of my papers to look, because she was reading it as I had written it. And I was amazed. So when I asked her, how do you know so much about bullying? This is a true story, 9-year-old girl. She said, that's my life, I live it every day.
Oh.
Further content, and I'll sum it up closer. I said, can you describe it to me? And she said, if you watch the Animal Channel, when the lions or the tigers chase the antelope or the deer, and they run in fear, she said, that's what it's like. The only thing is you don't get eaten. So what I realized coming from this young lady, this same type of fear is what she's experiencing when she's going to school.
That's unconscionable. So how do we handle that as a child, especially a child so young dealing with that, right?
Right,
Yeah.
we're talking a middle school child.
It's about communication. I know you brought that up earlier. It is about communication. It is about being aware of what these children are going through. And I think, as I said earlier, bullying's been around forever. I don't think there's been enough discussion in earlier stages in life of that bullying is out there. Be prepared for it. There's a wonderful saying, ask life not to be easier for our children, but they really acquire the skills and tools needed to take the challenges on life. I think that's where it begins.
So do you think
So-
we need, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask you, so do you think, should parents be as preparing the child as young as going into kindergarten?
You know,
Or is that
Debora,
too
that's a great
soon?
question, because there are statistics show that this starts in preschool.
Wow,
man.
that and I'm interesting because that's
Yeah, where the
shocking.
personalities are already derived from that, and it just accelerates from there.
Wow. That, I can't even imagine
So-
talking to
Right.
that age.
So what's the conversation? How should the
Yeah.
conversation be going then from the parent to the child? This is before any behaviors even happened. And
Right.
they're sending
I-
their child to school now, and we're putting this whole nother layer of fear of sending their 4 and 5-year-old to school.
I know.
Yeah, but if we don't, I think if it's how we handle it, we don't tell them that special needs is bad. And my thought is that if they really feel good about themselves, for me, self-worth and self-acceptance is the foundation for self-esteem. Without those two, you don't have self-esteem. And that's my version. But also, self-esteem is our first line of defense against bullying. If we feel good about ourselves, we may not be able to stop the bullying, but we may be able to stop the long-term effects.
The
So that I
long-term
feel good
I
about
see.
myself, so whatever that person's doing to me, it's not going to affect me. I'm not going to let it bother me.
That's greatly, yes.
What about the ones that don't feel good about themselves and they stay that way for a good amount of years? I mean, what, I guess that's a pretty loaded question, I know.
So the prevention, we're saying, begins at home.
Yeah, yeah.
Begins at home.
Absolutely.
Right, it's what a takeaway. Begins at home.
You know, we spoke briefly about sibling rivalry, and yes, that sibling rivalry, if it's easy.
Yes.
But I've had many situations where I've dealt with young adults that the sibling has been bullied, even by the younger sibling. So if that starts in the home, and then they, from a young child, and they go into school, they're already predetermined that they're less than if they're being bullied at home.
Oh, so they're set up by the time they go to school.
Yes. I've had many, many, many young adults that I've witnessed that with the older siblings, even younger siblings, that have been prepared, and then they take on that role.
That's pretty
sad.
It's sad, but it makes sense. It really makes sense. So have you had a whole lot of clients where you've had to work with them with bullying?
It's a topic that doesn't come out till later. It's something I think Debora hit on it. They're maybe embarrassed to talk about to their parents. They really don't want to discuss it. But the effects is what I'm dealing with when I meet them. And the parents don't understand what's going on because there's a lot of anger, a lot of frustration. They take out their anger on their parents because they can't do that back. They don't feel they can, or they withdraw. And the depression rate in the last 25 years has gone up dramatically in our country, our culture. But the one area that really intrigued me as I was writing the book was it was 13 and under. That's gone up 30% in the last 20 years. 13 and under.
So this whole bullying thing could be like the underlying thing that nobody wants to talk about, and then we wonder why they grow up and need anger management, because that's that underlying thing. They don't know how to deal with that.
It starts the whole pattern of the life of what their future is if we're not addressing it at a very young age.
Yes, that's our culture, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. So what about, okay, so let's say I'm taking care of my 3-year-old grandson. What do I say? I didn't have to deal with this when my kids were growing up. What would I say to my 3-year-old? I mean, he does think highly, he has a very high opinion of himself.
Right. And you know, certain personalities are adept for this already. They have it. I see that in my 2-year-old granddaughter. I could see and I'm not saying that she would be a type of bully, but I could see her defending her ground very rapidly, and she's only 2 years old. So certain personalities set in. Even between my 2 children, my daughter, no one was going to bully, but my son did have people bullying him. And if I had known better back then, I probably would have handled it a lot better, for him.
Well, back then we were about from the same generation, and it didn't appear to be as prevalent back then.
Maybe it's just with this could be part of the social media has brought it more into the forefront, and that it's because it's become more pervasive.
And there's a
That's
greater
true.
awareness now.
Yes,
There is-
Because of the combination of social media and the news, and it's more people talking about it. I mean, it
And-
has to, that you're aware that, that we have to have states that enact, I believe, I'm not sure quite, that all 50 states have some kind of policy or law regarding bullying.
Absolutely. And I'm from Jersey as well as Florida, and New Jersey was one of the first states that really enacted tough laws in the schools. And the response was very quick, and it did, stymie the activeness in the schools, but it can't stop the cyberbullying.
So what's the fine line? Let's talk about the child that's in school and they are experiencing bullying and the parent goes, maybe the child doesn't want the parent to go in because they don't want to deal with the after effects. They talk to the teacher and, how should that be handled? Give us some tips.
It is, especially the way it's regulated. They say you must talk about it, because if you ignore it, it becomes who we are. I've defined bullying, if I may, as it's the misuse and abuse of the human spirit that diminishes the inner flame, and it changes the way we think about ourselves. So if you think about that, when you talk about authenticity and who we are and who we think we are, there's a dramatic difference for these children. So if we talk about it and get it out in the open, it's like a relief for them. To get them to talk about it is the challenge, though.
So communication is key,
Number one.
right? It's true. John's saying
Right.
in my ear about the
The
our ear,
schools.
the
Well, that's what
schools.
they're learning. I mean, the schools don't have a handle on it either. I mean, there's different varying policies through all the different school districts, and sometimes they can make it worse of what happens.
Exactly. And it seems to be running more rampant than ever before, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to bring
We're
that.
just addressing, it's a small little piece of this huge topic, but to bring it into the forefront and hopefully give, through some resources for people to reach out to.
And Rob, you have this book that you wrote, The Digital Age, and I interviewed Rob several times on our chamber show and a few other shows, and when I got a hold of this book, I'm going, really? This is the only book I was aware of, The Digital Age, because it's been driving me insane with our kids and losing their ability to communicate and everything. And no wonder so much of this cyberbullying is going on out there, because like you said, Debora, they hide behind their computer, they hide behind their phone, and they can say anything they want and feel that it's okay.
I mean, isn't this a common scenario at home sometimes when you see like this, that's how they're doing? That's it.
It is.
That's how
It
they're doing.
is.
It's just, yes,
It truly is.
Instead
So-
of communicating.
And communicating is the key. Rob, you have chapter 76 in here is about bullying, but there's also other really great tips that our viewers can get this book, The Digital Age by Rob Imperato. I'll get this up right nice and close. And you are on Amazon, right?
Is that on Amazon?
Yep. So I highly recommend this book, and you can always get a hold of Rob if you want to have a one-on-one with him, maybe share some personal things. And to recognize a bully, you would think that is clear, but to a young child, maybe they feel that that's the norm for them. Does that make sense?
Yes, especially coming from a background where it's not discussed or not identified, because bullies come in different size packages, and
Yes.
bullies are not people with low self-esteem. The majority of them are feeling good about themselves. It's about control.
And there's been some incidences where the parents have confronted maybe the parents of the bully, and there's been some dramatic consequences.
Sure.
Where there's injury because the parents are getting into it. So it is related to the home, too, bullying.
Yeah.
And if one thing I could add is helping the parents understand not just the child that's being bullied, but the bully himself. The certain behaviors that indicate that your child is a bully, acting out and pushing people around, and that react that way is the way we can really spend the time.
And that could be that go-to suggestion when they are ending up where they kind of need some anger management, and maybe they're being bullied, so they turn around. I mean, it just goes right down the chain.
Yes.
Well, I want to thank you so much for tuning
Thanks
in
for
today.
taking the time.
We have only about a minute here, And this book is just phenomenal, and Rob's a really, really great guy. We're going to see you back in the fall again at our networking group, and I want to thank you so much, right, Debora?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us about this.
Thank you for having me. Have a great day.
You too, Rob. Thank you. Bye-bye. So that's some really good tidbits there from Rob, and I hope that this segment, which, like you said, it's just really scratching the surface. So yeah, think about it. If you know of anybody, or maybe if you've had any situations on your own and you want to know more about it, let's not sweep it under the rug. That's one of the purposes of this show with Debora, is to raise the awareness on the life and law with Debora, family law, and what things that you can do about it, things that you can learn to recognize what's going on out there in the real world.
Right, and pass the word on about our show.
That's right. Every Thursday at 4:30. And real quickly, what are we talking about next week?
Next week.
You say it, equitable.
Equitable distribution. We're going to talk about equitable distribution.
Oh, good.
Okay.
I don't know if I can get that out. Well, thank you, my dear. And we will see you. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Remember, you can get in on Rob's book, The Digital Age. You will be rewarded with this. I can promise you that. I'm Barbara Marvel, and we are going to say that's a wrap for today. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.